But going out on a limb and trying to bend laws and get around them, that's just not okay. I got too much respect for our legislators to try and second guess their will. It's not my job.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why we need some of that twinkle, twinkle, Van Winkle in the courts.
Yeah.
All right, America, Spokane, planet Earth, what's good? I'm Codell, and welcome to another episode of the Father's Gospel Podcast. We have a great guest today with us. We have Mr. Van Winkle out of Spokane, Washington, and he is running for position 11 as a judge here in Spokane County, and so we could not be more excited to interview him. Mr. Van Winkle, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of just let the people know who you are and what you're about.
Well, thanks for having me on here, Cody. I appreciate it. So I'm running for Spokane County Superior Court Judge. My background is in prosecution and also in appeal. So I started out as a prosecutor over in Central Washington, doing a little bit of everything, traffic tickets, homicide, everything in between, some civil work too, appeals. So yeah, when you work in a small county in a small office, you get to do a little bit of everything. It's actually a pretty good experience. And then since 2019, I've been back here in Spokane, where I grew up, working for the State Court of Appeals, working behind the scenes there for the judges. They're helping decide the cases from all over Central and Eastern Washington. So our courts in Washington State, we've got a few levels. We've got, on the lowest tier, we've got district and municipal courts.
Okay.
They do the traffic tickets, the misdemeanors, small claims. And then you go up to the Superior Court. Superior Court is your main trial court, a little bit of everything: felonies, family law, civil cases, slip and fall, land use, public records, all of that.
Okay.
And then after that, after the trial's done, parties can go up to the Court of Appeals and have their case reviewed by the judges there to decide whether or not the judge below made any mistakes that require a new trial. And then if you don't like what the Court of Appeals decides, you can always go up to the state Supreme Court.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
kind of right there in the middle of the hierarchy there, reviewing decisions. And it's been a wonderful experience because, like I said, we review everything that a superior court sees. And so running for a superior court position, you see a little bit of everything. But more than that, the Court of Appeals sees cases all over Central and Eastern Washington. So anything weird or unusual that happens throughout Central and Eastern Washington, pretty good bet it comes up with us. So we end up seeing cases there that, an individual judge could go their whole career and never see.
Okay.
So it's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah. Sounds like you were just in the thick of all of it. So no, that's really good. It's I can only imagine that's a very valuable experience that you've gotten from all that, and I'm sure it's just taught you a lot about the way the system operates and all that stuff. So yeah, no,
Absolutely. It's
yeah.
a way different experience working out of court versus practicing in front of a court.
Right. Getting to see a little bit of both sides of that. All right. Well, my question for you is, let's see. Oh yeah. What has inspired and motivated you to pursue a judgeship here in Spokane County?
Well, I've been thinking about it for a while. I've had a lot of supporters, not only where I work, but also friends out in the community who have been encouraging me to do this for several years. And they've been thinking maybe someday, maybe not this year, but earlier this year, talking to people in the community, and I was approached by some people who said, you know what, this might actually be the year. You got a pretty good shot this year. 4 years from now, the landscape's going to be a little bit different. So why don't you go for it? The time's right. My wife and I, we talked about it. We looked at that and we said, there's no time like the present. You might as well go for it. But, that's why I'm running this year. But ultimately why I'm running is there's a lot of changes that need to be made. And that's what's really been motivating me. For the last few years, on a part-time basis, I've been serving as a pro tem court commissioner in the Superior Court,
Okay.
which I liken to a substitute teacher for the courtroom.
Okay.
Filling in there on family law cases, civil commitment cases, juvenile cases. I've seen a lot of room for improvement. And I've come to be really frustrated looking at what's going on and seeing no sense of urgency at the court, no sense of urgency in people and making things change. And that concerns me because I owe all the time when I'm over there, what I've seen is often for people who don't have a lawyer, they're not getting their evidence in, they're not getting their evidence heard. So the case isn't getting decided on the merits based upon what's right, what's wrong, what actually happened. It's based upon who can navigate the system good enough to get an edge up in the litigation. And that's not right because ultimately a trial is supposed to be about both sides putting all their evidence before the decision maker, and the decision maker makes the most informed decision possible,
Right.
not a decision maker who's forced by Byzantine procedures to pretend evidence doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. No, and that definitely speaks to me because I've had to represent myself in court. And I mean, I tried my hardest, but I'm not trained in law. I'm not trained to be an attorney. So it was really difficult to, even though I'd get things filed, I wouldn't necessarily file them correctly at times. And so off that technicality, I definitely paid the price for uh for that. And yeah, no, I'm glad that is a big concern for you. So
Well, let me
yeah.
let me ask you this. I don't want to delve too much into your case, but when those situations came up where things weren't filed correctly, how many times were you told, we'll come back in 2 weeks and we'll have another hearing, or come back in a month and we'll reset this? How many times was the can kicked down the road?
Yeah, right. And I mean, honestly, I don't ever remember being told anything like that. I mean, to be completely honest, I was told by the courts that, well, I should know better basically how the law should operate. And I mean, it's really disheartening, especially when you have a kid involved. It's a family court situation, your child's involved, and
Yep.
it hurts. And I mean, it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle for me, just trying to push through and continuing this fight for my son. But I've got no choice. And I mean, again, hearing someone like you is very refreshing. And this is one of the reasons me and Kyle wanted to bring you on the podcast, because we just believe we need to get people like you in the system. So, yeah, so people can get a
Appreciate
fair
that.
shake. Yeah, no, we appreciate you. Let's see. For my other question, can you discuss any specific issues that you believe need to be addressed and resolved in the operation of our courts, family courts, and just courts in general?
Well, so I'll stick with family court since we are the Father's Gospel podcast. I do
Appreciate
want to kind
that.
of focus to your viewers. One of the biggest things that I see is how little communication there is and resources there are to help people represent themselves. There is a family court facilitator who's supposed to help people identify the right paperwork, but one person is not enough to fill all the demand that the county has for that
Right,
position. And you talk about tiers of changes that could be made. On one level, if you've got more money, let's say we've got the open pocketbook, yeah, we could use a few more judges.
right,
Next level down, if we're going to spend less money, I think our best bang for our buck at the county would be hiring a few more court facilitators. For the price of 3 or 4 court facilitators, that's less than half of what it would cost out another judge. And I just know that we would have hundreds of more people who would be helped having their paperwork identified, filled out correctly, they get it to court on time, and just help them navigate that process. Now, of course, they can't give them legal advice, they can't fill out the paperwork for them, but they
right,
can give them an idea of what the judges and court commissioners are looking for. We need those resources. And then you just keep moving down the line to cheaper and cheaper. You go a next tier down cheaper. One of the biggest things that I'd like to see from a technology perspective is making it easier for people to get electronic evidence in front of the court.
right.
Right
Yeah,
now, you have evidence on your cell phone. Let's say it's a threatening voicemail or a video of you being harassed. To get that in front of a judge right now, you'd have to go to a special court that's only open certain days a week and certain hours, sit there for hours, get a special order. Then you have to get that video on a thumb drive. Not something that a lot of people do anymore because they do everything from their phone now. That is their PC.
Right.
And your phone doesn't have a thumb drive port on it, but you
No.
got to put it on a thumb drive, get a copy of that to the court so many days before the hearing, get a copy to the other party so many days before the hearing. And all that time, it's time that you're not at work, you're not getting paid, you're interrupting your life. And then you have to come back again for the hearing. And that's another day off work. Now, if you were over in King County, you could do all of that from your phone on your couch.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, I know my case has started up again, and I mean, over the last month, I've had to take a lot of time off work, and just like everybody else, obviously I got bills to pay, and it makes it more difficult for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, just making it easier for people to get their work done at the courthouse with the fewest number of trips to the courthouse, being able to do things by email, being able to do things electronically, it saves people trips to the courthouse. The cheapest thing the court could do, they could do it tomorrow, is get rid of their stupid local rule that they put in place on September 1, requiring all bench copies to be physical copies delivered physically to the court.
So that was just this last September that they put that in place.
September 1, just a month and a half ago, they put that rule in place. And you look, Ferry County, Stevens County, Lincoln County, Pend Oreille County, Whitman County, every single county that touches Spokane County, they let you email those same documents to the judge. And those counties have way fewer resources than Spokane. They're a lot poorer than Spokane. But you just think, if all these smaller, less well-funded counties are able to do it, why aren't we?
That seems like such a step backwards. I mean, just in the wrong direction. And yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, that's weird. I mean, are they yeah, that's just bizarre. Okay. I mean, is there any other changes you'd like to see or
That's kind of the short list for family court.
right.
There's other changes that need to happen, but that's the short list for family court is getting rid of stupid rules, making our other rules more streamlined, easier to do. And then if we start getting money in funding positions, yeah, more family court facilitators, because absolutely those standard forms, they're mandatory forms. Everyone has to use them. So it's nice. The form is there. But oh my gosh, if you're not a lawyer, trying to understand that form and fill it out correctly is a nightmare. And
Yeah,
trying to do a calculation for child support and fill out the child support worksheet, whew,
right.
good luck.
Yeah, well, and it's crazy because if you go on Google and you go on their reviews for Spokane County Superior Court, it's got 1 star. And one of the biggest complaints on there that you'll see over and over is people actually complaining about the court facilitators and the attitude of some of the court facilitators in there. And I mean, I know from experience, I've dealt with it firsthand. Kyle has dealt with it firsthand. A lot of times we feel like we're just completely dismissed and almost treated like we're stupid for not knowing these things, and it's very frustrating. And
Yeah. And
yeah,
I don't want to badmouth the family law department and the family court facilitator and the people who work there because I've worked with them and I think I see what they do a little bit differently. And really to me that it looks to me as a response of people who are underappreciated by the county and understaffed and underhelped. I mean, they are under fire every day, a million things coming out them, and really they just don't have the support that they need. And I think it causes burnout. I think it causes frustration, and of course that makes the court's customers' lives harder. So no,
right.
you know, I support them a lot. I think those people are good people, but I think they need more support. But
I mean
I
that
definitely I've heard the frustration that people in your shoes have had with them. I've heard that, I've seen it, and it's something that I'd like to get them the support that they need in terms of staffing because it really is for them. It's a stress response to just being not
they're
appreciated and
yeah, they're
undersupported.
dealing with a lot. And I mean, it makes sense looking from the other side. I mean, you're overwhelmed, you're understaffed, and it's just like any other job. If you don't feel like you have the support you need, you definitely end up feeling burnt out and you start getting frustrated with the whole process. So that does make a lot of sense.
But absolutely, for people in your shoes, it that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it any easier.
Right, right. Yeah. Okay, for my other question, what kind of support have you received from individuals, organizations, and the community and how has it influenced your perspective on the functioning of our family courts?
Well, the support, a lot of the support that I've been getting, I've got lawyers and judges supporting me, community members, friends, people I haven't even talked to in 10, 15, 20 years. It's amazing the support that you see come out when people remember you and go, oh, yeah, I remember him. He was a good person. How can I
Yeah,
help? And so that's encouraging. But then also just running a campaign, it's a it's a professional endeavor. You need a lot of help and you need a lot of support. And so that's where over the last 6 months, I've been getting support from more establishment areas. And I really appreciate that because, to run a professional campaign and get your name out there and to do that, you really need people who've done it before and have the experience. So, you know, I've got endorsements from the Regional Labor Council, the Farm Bureau PAC, the Home Builders Association, just to name a few of the more um, mainline groups that have been supporting my campaign. And then, of course, a lot of people on the left and on the right, State Senator Andy Billig, State Senator Mike Patton, those two guys, it's hard to even get them in a room together on anything and to get them to agree on anything. But, the two of them, they agree on me this year. So I'm humbled to have support on both the right and the left and have people recognize that there's a need for change in our community.
well, and that definitely to me speaks volumes about your character. If you can get two people that, have difficulty communicating with each other and coming to the table on things, the fact that you can get these two individuals to embrace you, that yeah, no, that definitely speaks volumes about your character. All right, well, let's see. Do you believe that well, no, let's move on to this one. So, Washington State, they're ranked 43rd in the nation for fathers' parental rights, and Spokane County, unfortunately, is ranked last in the state of Washington for fathers' parental rights. What do you propose we can do to help address this situation, which is having an adverse effect on dads, children, obviously, and even mothers?
So one thing that I'd like to see, there's a couple things. So at the local level and at the state level, both what I'd like to see more light put on this issue. And at the local level, I think we need to do a better job of collecting data and publishing data on decisions and the breakdowns on what's going on. And at the state level, one of the things that I'm disappointed to learn over the course of this campaign is up through 2016, every time a parenting plan was entered in the state, a copy would be sent from the county to the state, and then the state would publish a report every year on how much time dads got versus moms got in each county, and it'd be broken down based upon was it an agreed parenting plan or a contested parenting plan. And you could see which counties it appeared that there was a disproportionate impact on one or the other.
Right.
But the thing that we never collected, well, we stopped collecting it in 2017 after the legislature said you don't have to collect it anymore. But one thing that we never published was a breakdown judge by judge. And
Mm,
that would be the light that I really want to see is which judges are there judges who appear to be biased one way or another.
right.
Now, that data on its face, if you see a disproportionate amount of time going to mom or dad or whoever, it doesn't necessarily mean they're biased, but it is cause to stop, dig into the cases and take a look at the cases because every case is unique. Everything is different. But over time, in the aggregate, you can see a trend. And those trends, more often than not, don't lie. They can reveal a bias, but you do need to verify it.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
we never bothered to collect and publish that data, even when we were collecting it. And so we could never dig in and confirm what people in the community would say or what they would think, where they'd say, this judicial officer, you don't want them. You're going to get hammered. You're not going to get parenting time. Well, we never gave people the data to prove it or disprove it. And I think
Yeah.
that's wrong. You look at all of our legislators, their voting records, they're everywhere. They're easy to find. You know exactly what they voted for, what they voted against, how many times. You've got organizations out there that rate them on how good they are on those issues. You've got environmental groups that give them a percentage on how good they are, gun rights groups that give people a percentage on how good or bad they are, right to life or abortion rights or any of those groups. They're out there going through that data, combing it, and giving people scores and showing what they voted for and voted against. But we don't do that for judges. We don't do that for courts. We don't show the disparities in family time. We don't show the disparities in sentencing or the disparities in other types of rulings. And I think that's wrong. I think that needs to change.
Right. I mean, from my perspective, having that information about judges and commissioners is crucial because I would say overall on a day-to-day basis, judges and commissioners probably have more of an impact on what's going on in the local community versus a state legislature, and I mean, I could be wrong on that, but yeah.
I think you're right. And one of the funny things is the elected officials who have the most impact on your life are the elected officials you know the least about. Your judges, your city council members, your school board members. If you are more likely to encounter one of them in your lives than you are the governor or your state senator or your congressperson. But for those people, the city council, the school board, the judges, they're nonpartisan, so you don't even know where they lie on that spectrum.
Right.
You barely know anything about them other than maybe a blurb that you read in the campaign mailer. It's hard for the most part. They don't have big, well funded campaigns. And so it's really hard to get to know them and where they stand, which also makes it hard to hold them accountable too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you know any of them that are ever interested that want to come on the show, we'll interview them happily. So, yeah, we'd love to get them all on the show to interview them. So, yeah, no, it's definitely important for people to really start getting more involved on the local level, even more so than the national level, just when it comes to politics and all that type of stuff. Because again, I mean, knowing what's going on with your judges, your commissioners, or anyone in government locally, I mean, they're the ones that have the biggest effect on your day-to-day life. So yeah, extremely important. All right. Well, another question is in. Oh, 1 second. I think Kyle has arrived. Just
Oh,
one quick
terrific.
moment. Brother man, welcome. Got your headset ready, man. You're good to go. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Glad you are here. All right.
Thank you for
Yeah, of course,
you two
brother.
gentlemen
Yeah.
pausing for me.
No, we're glad you're here. So, and then Mr. Van Winkle, so I know we asked you this one last time, and I know you don't know too much about it, but this is a big issue that I feel like we need to do some deep diving into. In the state of Washington, the federal government matches the state child support collections by 66 cents to the dollar through Title 4D. And we believe this financial structure denies due process to families and children. Do you think the current financial incentives in our family courts lead to keeping fathers out of the home?
So I think for people, so Kyle, last time we talked about this, I hadn't heard about it. So could you give that explanation again? Because that
Yes,
was
sir.
really big news to me.
Yes, sir. So what what happens or how it's supposed to be is Social Security Act is this overall thing for people that aging out. And what the Social Security Act does is for those people that are going to retirement age. And what the child support, which was created in 1979, drawing from the Social Security account, has told the states if you collect whatever dollar amount that you collect, for instance, here in Washington State, we will match whatever's collected 66 cents for every dollar.
Right.
So, for instance, my child support is up there, is $1,100, and so for every 1,100 I give to the state of Washington, then some form of accounting from what I was told from DSHS was that they take 5% off of that. The mother still gets 1,100, but they take 5% of that somehow and use it for some kind of an admin fee for the state of Washington. But in turn, they report that to the federal government, and then the federal government gives them 66 cents for every dollar that they have collected through that. And that's multiplied by millions of fathers in the state of Washington.
Yeah.
So I don't know what our population is, and that works nationwide. So it's 66 cents on the dollar. And so that's what Title 4D
So that's in all
does.
50 states, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, all 50 states. So how the breakdown is, I don't know if they do 5%, admin fee, wherever that comes from. But again, it's 66 cents on every dollar nationwide.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So in having the federal government subsidize child support enforcement, yeah, it absolutely creates an incentive for states to aggressively collect that and aggressively pursue that. And I think sometimes that has an unintended consequence. I mean, the idea behind it's fantastic. The
Yeah.
idea, when you think of the image in your head, you've got the image of, oh, there's deadbeat dad out there who's not paying his support, who has all this money. But, as you and I know, seeing in the courts, the reality is a lot of times the dads who aren't paying, a lot of them it's just because they can't. Because what ends up happening is when you split households, there's just not enough money to go around. And
Right.
one of the things that shocked me, it was a real eye opener for me when I started substituting as a pro tem. One of my first hearings was on the support enforcement docket where I was doing child support. And, you bring dad in and you say, hey, dad, why aren't you paying this much? Okay, how much can you pay? And you go through that and you talk to him. And this guy said, he's telling me his whole story and what he's going on. And we're looking at the money and he's saying, this is how much I work. This is how much I make. He was working at a local hardware store. And this is where I sleep at night. And he was sleeping in his car. He was
Yeah.
paying his child support, sleeping in his car because there wasn't enough money left over at the end of the month for him to have an apartment. And I know how much housing costs in Spokane. I know how much apartments cost in Spokane. And looking at his finances, I know he was not lying to me. I know that there was not money for that, for him to have an apartment, but he was doing his duty. He was doing his obligation. But it's hard because so much of the time it is, okay, do I pay all my child support? Or do I have a roof over my head? Or do I eat tonight? Because of course, even if you're on SNAP benefits on food stamps, that doesn't always last a month.
Right.
And so, I look at it, I go, okay, this program, it's a good idea in my head. If you're trying to get at the deadbeat dads who aren't paying, this is great having the federal government step in and help. But when you cross over and you realize that most dads aren't deadbeat dads, and I say deadbeat dad, but that's the colloquial image. There's actually women on that docket as well.
Right.
It's not all men. I mean, disproportionately it is men. But the people that I've seen on it, they are not people who I describe as deadbeat. They
Right.
are people who I describe as desperate, just trying to make ends meet. And so you go, okay, when you're getting all this money from the federal government, are you still doing any good when this is who you're going after vigorously? Now, there might be other ways possibly to work with this population to help them out because I think these dads often and the parents do want to be paying and they are trying to pay. But of course, you do have the bad eggs and the bad apples out there too. But as they say, don't let one bad apple spoil the whole bunch. And I feel like sometimes that's kind of where we're at now. But
Right.
that's a conversation for Congress and the state. As judges, there's not a whole lot we can do about it because the child support laws are written in a way that for judges, it's pretty mechanical. It's pretty much if this, then that. There's no discretion. And so, as sympathetic as a judge might be to the issue that there isn't enough money for dad or the child or both, and they're doing the best that they can. And, how do you distribute this fairly? As sympathetic as a judge might be to that, there's very little discretion to do anything about that. I mean, that really is something that if it's going to change, it's going to have to be through another branch of government.
Yeah. Yeah. And here in Washington too, and I'm sure this goes on in other states, I think it makes it worse too because like here, if a dad falls behind on child support for so long, they can take his license away and all that type of stuff. And I mean, I know in my experience, Kyle's experience, and I'm sure Kyle knows other fathers, the vast majority of us, we are not deadbeat dads. And sometimes bad things just happen in life. You lose a job and things like that go on. And all of a sudden, the state is threatening to take your license away. And it's like, how is that going to help the whole entire situation? I mean, it's just, and then jail time on top of that. And I get it, there are deadbeat dads out of there, but me and Kyle, out there, but me and Kyle, I mean, we've been involved in this for a long time, and we know for a fact that the vast majority of dads who are struggling to be in their kids' lives, it's not because they don't want to be in their kids' lives, it's because there's just so many underlying issues that's being forced upon them in the family courts. And I mean, we got to figure out a way to get this fixed because as a whole, if we have healthy families, not only does it benefit the families, but it's going to benefit our society in general. You know, less stuff to go through the government and all that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too, as well, that the ramifications are so, two immediately is you're going to take your license. Well, every job that I've seen, even as a burger flipper at McDonald's, they ask, do you have a valid driver's license?
Right.
And second thing is like, if you don't pay for so long, the threat is, well, we're going to throw you into jail. Well, or even worse, prison.
Right.
So I think the max amount, I'm not sure what the RCW or WAC would be for this, but some states have 5-year prison terms for the amount of so I don't understand that. So you hammer the father, send him to prison for 5 years. He comes back and he has even a larger arrears debt,
Right.
and then he can't get a job because now he's got a felony on his record
Right.
because he didn't pay child support.
Yeah.
And it's not a non-violent. So I think some judges honestly need to kind of test that theory because Ozzy Knezovich didn't, for instance, people that were driving while license suspended, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't enforcing that. He would ticket them and then he wouldn't jail them.
Okay.
But he said that that was unconstitutional.
Okay.
And I understood his reasoning behind it. And then when I think that probably some judges need to make that stand and say, you know what, this is an unconstitutional order. It's just like in the Marine Corps where you have an unlawful order.
Yeah.
Hey, go clean my personal vehicle. Well, I'm not going to clean your personal vehicle, Gunny. That's an unlawful order. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that needs to apply here because there's so much. It just builds and builds and builds, and then that's again it goes back to why there's such a high suicide rate for men as fathers because they're
Right.
just in this pit of despair. And some days I don't know how I'm
Yeah.
making it.
I mean,
Yeah.
were you telling me that the suicide rate amongst fathers is even higher than
78%. So of those fathers that have that and have a high conflict considered anytime you go to court, it's conflict.
Yeah.
So, it's adversarial.
Right.
So I don't know what it's like saying more gooder,
Right.
as a sense, but it's high adversarial, high conflict case.
Yeah.
Well, you have that high conflict case, and the father is just like, my hands are tied. What do I need to do? How do I get out of this debt?
Yeah.
And they're creating that pit of despair.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, some of these protection orders, honestly, piggyback onto that stuff. And I think like this new course of control law that just happened January 23rd, it says on one of the 26 things that are considered coercive control or domestic violence is if the man tries to commit or threatens suicide, then that's domestic violence against. And that's ridiculous. It's like, what do you do at that point in time?
Right. I mean, I know, I just was in court last week and I mean, I handle this stuff really well, but last night it finally just hit me. I mean, I came home, I was going to come home to do some work on the Father's Gospel Foundation and everything I'm going through with my son, it just hit me hard last night. And I just had to take a step back and rejuvenate, and regather myself because sometimes if I don't, it just you have moments where you start feeling hopeless, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, I know you know it, you know?
And that's why Mr. Van Winkle's story, your story, when you said, I can't imagine my father not being in my life there. Maybe he wasn't there 100% of the time, but that's, I think there's this thing where judges have seen like, well, I'm above you on this, and I sit up here above you on this, and they take that mentality throughout their life too, in that sense. And it's like, no, 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 you put your pants on the same way as me, one leg at a time. So be human about it. I get that you're in a position of authority. However, don't abuse that position of authority. And they forget that they came from a man and a woman.
Right.
And so that's why Mr. Van Winkle and Mr. Casey, when they said, I can't imagine that my father not being in their life. And that politicians, there's some that'll, shaking babies and kissing hands. But
Yeah.
that's what I didn't feel from Mr. Van Winkle and Mr. Casey.
Right.
They honestly
know,
knew.
Go
I've
ahead,
never really
Mr.
been
Van.
close to my parents, but they were always there.
Mhm.
And even when my dad worked on the road, I mean, he had a job for a long time that took him all over the Northwest. And yeah, a week at a time that I might not see him, but when he was there, it made a difference. And growing up, it made a difference. And I know I am the person I am because of that, because he was there and because my mom was there, but also because their families were there. My dad's family was around, my mom's family around. And I think about when a family separates and then a kid spends a disproportionate amount of time with one parent, there are cases where that's appropriate, but at the same time, you're not just cutting off the other parent, you're also cutting off half of who that kid is.
Yeah.
Cutting off the extended family, you're cutting off the grandparents, you're cutting off the aunts and uncles, you're cutting off the cousins, you're cutting off their heritage.
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
there's so much, you're not just losing a parent, but you're losing half of who you are.
Right.
Mhm.
And the kids at the time growing up, they don't realize it, they don't know it, but when they get older, they do want to know. They do ask those questions and they do feel, well, at least people I've talked to, less whole, not knowing half of their family, not knowing half of their history, and not having that influence in their life. And I think it matters. And I don't think that that's something that courts should end or take away lightly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up without my dad. I haven't seen my dad since I was 3 years old, and the few memories I have from him are not very pleasant. But at the same time, I mean, I still, even to this day, like we don't, I've accepted the fact we're not going to have a relationship or anything like that, but I still love him because he's
Yeah,
my blood, he's my father, you know, and
exactly.
I would love to know more about his side of the family to this day, and I always will want to know. And that's one thing that kills me with my son, what I'm going through, because it's like I know my son's 6 now. And even though he's only 6, I remember being 6, wondering about my dad. And I know he's out there wondering, like, where's dad right now? And and I'm doing everything I can to get back to him. But I mean, yeah, it just, I don't want my son to go through that, like, at all. So, yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
we create a hole in kids that can never be filled that way.
Mhm.
We absolutely do.
Right. Well, and then it trickles down into, I mean, the rest of society because it's like kids without, kids raised in fatherless homes. 90% of the prison population grew up
Mhm.
without fathers in their homes. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I got stats for days on that. And yeah,
Yeah, you know, that's a really good stat, like the Americans Family um Policy Institution, and they bring up all these things that come up, but in reality it's just like, why can't people understand that? Why can't they see that? The
right.
water's wet, the sky is blue,
Yeah.
grass is green.
Yeah.
It's so simple, but it's like we need a law for this, and then we need a law for that law in
Right.
order to do something. It's like, no, we shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
It's who's suffering right away? Who's the immediate victim right away? It's the children, because they
Yeah.
don't have either the mother or the father in there. And um, I've discussed this with a lot of people, and it's like nobody wants to get to the root of the problem. And the root of the problem for fatherlessness is because um, they're allowed, one party is allowed to get away with alienating that child, use that child as a weapon or a shield.
Right. And unfortunately, the court's own stats, the government's own stats bear it out. And it's really frustrating. All right. Well, last question I got for you, Mr. Van Winkle. Let's see. What can we, the people, do to get involved and help fix the issues and financial corruption that is currently plaguing our broken family courts?
Well, the first thing is getting different judges on the bench. That's one we got right now. We've got a few weeks before the election is ended and the ballots are due. So that's number one. Telling people who to vote for, that's another one. But, after elections are over, because they only come up every few years, that's not when you end. I mean, you start talking to people about it. You let people in the community know that this is an issue that needs to be addressed so that it stays on the community's radar.
Right.
And so when elections come around again, they've heard about these issues. They know that they're issues, and it's still not necessarily a priority, but it's something that they know needs to be addressed, and it's something that they know is important. So talking about it, keeping this going. And then, of course, there's legislative changes, and that's a whole nother, ball game that, as judges and judicial candidates, we're not really involved in. And getting it anytime that you can get in front of elected officials, particularly at the state legislature, and let them know these are issues. Every January, the legislature meets. You need people on both sides looking at the bills that are being introduced and looking at and giving responses to the bills that are being introduced. And also the legislators, they need people who can go in and testify in committee, who have the lived experience that you do, who can say, this was my experience. This is how this bill would change my experience for the better or for the worse. But so often when legislation gets made and gets passed, it's not always done in a vacuum where it's just a bunch of eggheads in a room, but oftentimes they don't always get to hear from the people with the lived experience, with the customers that they're going to affect, or they only hear from a certain segment. They don't get a real cross section of the community. So, ways that people can be involved is if you hear about a bill, write your local legislator about it. Here in Washington, they actually do read it. You might get a canned form letter back, but you know that they actually did read it. And I can say that from experience. I know that I used to work at the legislature before I went to law school, and no, someone reads it and they take that feedback into consideration. And when they start getting more of it, the light bulb goes off. Aha, this is an important issue.
Yeah.
And then they do want to work with people who need to testify in committees. They do want to find constituents to testify in those committee hearings. So part of it is just building those networks, getting to know those people. And that's how you make a difference. That's how you make the law more fair for everyone.
Right.
Is by being in the room where it gets made.
Well, and that's actually something me and Kyle are doing. We had a meeting with a gentleman named Mark Ludwig, and right now he's got legislation in 31 states that he's trying to push through for equal shared parenting. And he's been successful, I think, in like 4 or 5 states so far with getting bills pushed through.
I'm not really sure what that's one thing, because he had a huge thing that he had right after our interview with him.
But long story short, he's been really successful, and actually we're going to be working with him, and he's actually going to start training us on how to deal with legislatures and start getting our stories out there. So we're definitely excited to take on that mission, and hopefully we can get more fathers and mothers on board to start joining us on that. So yeah.
There's I think it's the best known thing. And I don't know if this will ever come across your desk at any point in time, Mr. Van Winkle, but they call it the silver bullet. And the silver bullet is for when, let's say let's just say 81.7% of the time the woman is done given the custody, full custody, right?
Yeah.
Well, the silver bullet for them on this playlist is like, okay, first make the accusation that she's abused. Second, make the accusation that the children are abused.
Right.
Then it goes through this playlist. But when I guess the best thing to do is to know that playbook and to see it and to see it and make it aware to these judges and try to do it like what I think the 48 laws of power says. Don't try to recognizing, understand, and power. It says don't try to um, get somebody on their you know their morals type thing.
Okay.
Get them on to where how this could affect them
Right.
and their pocket. And I mean, it's like as evil as that sounds and nasty as that sounds, that's true.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
And a
these
lot of
days.
yeah. Yeah.
Cody, that goes back to where we started here talking about changes that need to be made so that people can actually get their evidence heard by the judge. And you
Right.
talked about the silver bullet. The sad thing is people do go to court and lie. Judges know that they get lied to every day, and it's
Mhm.
frustrating. But how we're supposed to counter that is to have a free and fair and equal discovery process, and also make it easy for people to get their evidence in front of the judge so that the judge can look at it and hopefully figure out who's telling the truth and who's not.
Right.
But when you've got a system right now that's set up that it's so hard for people to do that when they don't have a lawyer, judges absolutely do get the wool pulled over their eyes. And that's something that I don't know why people aren't more angry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I just went to, and it didn't dawn on me till afterwards, but I went to a veteran stand down and was helping out SPOFI Fatherhood Initiative and sat in on their stuff. There was a lady that was talking to me, and I told her I was going to write a book. It's Silver Bullet, Marginalization of Men. And
Okay.
so I started explaining her my story, what my personal issue was, and there's no parenting plan and there's no custody order, but she knows what to do. So she did the protection order. And so each year, or well, for the past 2 years, the first time how it initiated was that I got a protection order under the new course of control law because I didn't pay her cell phone bill and her car insurance.
Yeah.
And they considered that force of control. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So I would just blew my mind. And then right after that, they said, well, because you made podcast statements, because you made these statements, it was completely taken out of context. So they renewed that. And it's like, you people won't even allow me to introduce this stuff
Right.
to show that she's lying about this.
Yeah.
And the evidence, because they said, well, hearsay is allowed in domestic violence cases,
Right. Yeah.
and I was like, you got to be kidding me. There's no, I mean, even the lowest standard I think is preponderance of evidence,
Right.
but for you to allow hearsay, that's just has to be out of the court.
Yeah.
The same thing
No,
with
I
discretion with
agree.
judges. I mean, a law is black and white,
Yeah.
and that's what I love about laws. If you don't like the law, then let's try to amend or change it. But if the law says this, then we should be
Right. Following the law.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why I think the pushback for the old guard that Mr. Van Winkle is probably going to go in there with all our prayers and faith and get elected. But I think the old guard is standing that. So they're gatekeeping. And so
Right.
they don't want, Mr. Van Winkle coming through that gate because he's got these newfangled ideas called,
We need, yeah.
morals, ethics, and values in the law. What's the law say?
Right.
They don't want that because it breaks up their gravy train.
Right.
So when I know that some of those people that were in there, they, as soon as he said, well, you have to look at our laws through the lens of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And that was a great analogy, and it's a perfect analogy for it. But some people are just like,
Yeah,
Right.
those things scare some people sometimes, but
yes, sir.
it following the laws and following the Constitution shouldn't be a novel concept for courts. So often I tell people, whether I like the law or not, I take an oath to uphold it. I take an oath to follow it. And the second I'm not willing to do that, I need to find another job. If I don't like the law, if I want to change the law, I need to go find another job.
Yeah.
The judges, they have a mechanism through the Superior Court Judges Association to propose changes to laws relating to courts and in the administration of justice. And they do that. And if I'm elected, I'll work through that. But going out on a limb and trying to bend laws and get around them, that's just not okay. I got too much respect for our legislators to try and second guess their will. It's not my job.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why we need some of that twinkle, twinkle, Van Winkle in the courts.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but
and
that's a huge thing though. I think that is their biggest pushback because they have the new guard coming in,
Right.
and it's not a new idea. It's just like, hey, I'm going to start doing this because this is
Going
what we
back to
should have been doing,
basics.
yeah,
Yeah.
10 or 15 years ago.
Right.
But yet, no, 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 no. Come here, boy. You gotta be good and play the game. You can't,
Right.
if you don't get along, you're not gonna go along. So
Well, Mr.
you know,
Van
that's
Winkle,
true.
go ahead.
Well, I mean, you see the pushback that I've had in my campaign.
mhm.
Yeah.
I start putting ideas out there and they say, oh, no, those ideas are too expensive. You can't do them. And, like I said, Cody, I've got ideas. Some of them are expensive, some of them are free, and you could do them tomorrow. It's all about what resources we have available, but change needs to happen.
Yeah, well,
Change
I
starts
think
by
most
changing the
ideas
decision
you've
makers.
shared with me would probably be pretty financially efficient and not all that expensive. I mean, yeah, yeah. Well, Mr. Van Winkle, is there anything you'd like to tell the people before this interview ends? Can you give them some reasons on why they should vote for you and why they need to vote for you?
Well, as far as voting for me, I'd hope that they listen to this. They understand that there's problems in the court that need to be resolved. And I'm genuinely interested in trying to resolve them and working with people to make the court easier for people to represent themselves and more efficient so that people can get their cases heard timely instead of waiting months and months to get a decision on an issue. But the way that people can help is vote, turn in their ballot before November 5th. If it is November 5th, go to an actual drop box. Don't put it in the mail because it has to have a postmark stamp on it of the 5th to be counted. So if you get down to the wire, make sure you get to an actual county drop box. And tell people about me, tell people about the campaign, and
Yeah. And where can people find you online?
www.votevw.org.
All right,
Awesome,
www.vw.org. All right, yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Van Winkle. And before we get out of here, do you just have once we end this, you just got a quick moment to talk?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and please make sure you check out Mr. Van Winkle. He is a breath of fresh air, and this is the type of gentleman that we need to get into the family courts and just our courts in general. So I encourage all of you to do your research into him, and I promise you won't be disappointed. This man's got some brilliant ideas, and from what I can see, I feel like his heart is in the right place. So, yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next episode. Stay blessed, and remember, God loves you. I'm Codell. This is
Kyle Spencer.
and this is
Andrew Van Winkle.
all right. All right, guys, you have a great night. We'll talk to you soon. We'll see you next episode.